During your research, you'll encounter photographs that bring your veteran's history to life. Be sure to take plenty of notes on where you found them, because they need citations like anything else. But images are more than just visual flair. They help us unravel the mysteries of the past. How can we read images to give us additional information beyond surface details? Saddle up for some really neat historical detective work. Investigating the life of U.S. Army Major Joseph John Nekoranec through photographs adds important context to his biography. When researching Nekoranec, we were very lucky to find a large collection of his very own photos, which had been donated by a family member to the Alaska State Library. You see, Nekoranec, an Army engineer, spent much of World War II in Alaska and the Aleutian Islands, improving fortifications and air bases there for defense against the Japanese. Even casual photographs like this one can provide us with an understanding of soldiers and their environment. While war is terrible and grueling, much of a service person's time is spent in ordinary activities outside combat. What can we learn from this photo of Joseph Nekoranec? For one thing, we get a glimpse of physical conditions in Alaska. The road is muddy, and his pants are spattered to the knees. He carries a thick coat over his arm, telling us Nekoranec was up against some inclement weather. Comparing this to other photos in his collection may help us find out whether these circumstances were ordinary or extraordinary. This photo can add to our knowledge. Snow covers the ground, and Nekoranec's Jeep has a cover pulled over the top. Looks like tough weather may have been a regular obstacle. There are neat rows of identical white wood-clad buildings. The roads have been cleared of heavy snow, and we can see by the presence of electric lines that these buildings provided some modern amenities for the soldiers. Alaska and the Aleutian Islands were sparsely populated before World War II, so American armed forces needed to build much of the housing they required. The Army built more than 1,400 miles of road to support 300 new military installations. Alaska did not become a state until 1959, so the territory lacked large-scale civilian infrastructure during Nekoranec's time there. Notice how some big-picture research helps us understand these background details of Nekoranec's story. A close-up of Nekoranec shows him to be wearing heavy shirt and pants again, appropriate for a day out in the Alaskan tundra. We know from a primary source called the Soldier's Handbook that soldiers were assigned uniforms by their commanding officer. Those uniforms were generally woolen or cotton and were assigned based on weather and climate conditions the soldier could expect. The hat that Nekoranec is wearing in this photo clearly shows the Montana peak that soldiers were expected to keep clean and in shape. Nekoranec also appears to be carrying a lantern, a canteen, and 2 firearms, a pistol at his hip and a rifle over his shoulder. Nekoranec might have been preparing for a surveying trip to a remote location, bringing everything he needed for his work and survival, and appropriate to his job as an engineer. This gem of a photograph provides important context about the social lives of soldiers, particularly those stationed in remote or isolated areas where contact with everyday American life was scarce. Presumably taken by Nekoranec, this photo shows a group of men in uniform gathered around a glamorous woman who is signing autographs. Since famous actresses or singers probably didn't visit Alaska very often during the war, figuring out who this is might help us learn something about where Nekoranec was at a given time. By searching for famous women who visited Alaska during World War II, we came upon articles about legendary entertainer Bob Hope's tour of the area in 1942. On September 10, 1942, Hope was issued a special permit to enter Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. Though his tours to entertain troops would later be famous, this was Hope's first overseas entertainment trip during the war. The Library of Congress holds a copy of this special permit that allowed Hope to enter Alaska. What does that have to do with the woman in Nekoranec's photo? Among the performers in Hope's group was a popular singer and actress named Frances Langford, the only woman on this first tour to Alaska. Comparing portraits of Langford to Nekoranec's photo, we soon confirm that it's her. Compare her hairstyle and smile in both photos. Then we checked a local newspaper, the Nome Nugget, in the archives, which reported when Hope and Langford had returned from Alaska. With the dates we've found, we can infer Nekoranec's photo was taken between September 10th and 25th, 1942. Pretty cool to be able to place Nekoranec right there. While most of the people in the image are wearing cold weather gear, including the starlet with the fur hood, others appear to only have standard issue shirts and pants. Historic weather records in the area at that time confirm that temperatures ranged primarily in the 32 to 65 degree range. For a starlet traveling from Los Angeles, a fur-lined parka may have been necessary. For the soldiers more accustomed to the weather, not so much. With just one photograph, we've identified a significant event in Nekoranec's service, and we even know what the weather was like. This photograph aboard a ship may provide us with clues about how men and supplies arrived in Alaska. This casual shot happens to capture the words U.S. Army FP-29 on the side of this ship. According to navsource.org, FP designated a ship as a freight and personnel vessel. These were smaller vessels that served to transport people and supplies and were not intended for combat. FP-29 was launched in 1943, so this was a new ship at the time Nekoranec posed on deck. We also know from the National Park Service that until the Army began building significant road systems, moving people and supplies in Alaska was done nearly exclusively by air or sea. The use of FP vessels there by the Army was common practice. Alaska isn't just one of the largest land masses in the U.S., it also has a lot of islands. In fact, the Japanese briefly seized the Aleutian Islands nearby during the war and could have used them to launch an invasion of Alaska and Canada. Part of Nekoranec's role in the Army was to survey airfields that could help protect these distant islands. Looking at this National Park Service map illustrates the daunting task of protecting such a vast area. This photograph demonstrates the remoteness and difficulty of what Nekoranec was surveying. Not much of an airfield yet, is it? Many of you will encounter images of airplanes and ships in search of your veterans. If the image pertains directly to your veteran, pay attention to visible numbers on the plane or ship. Just like the ship's FP designation before helped us to find more info on NavSource, the aircraft's tail number can lead us to more discoveries too. Using those tail numbers, researchers were able to identify this plane as a Sikorsky S-39. It was one of only 21 such planes manufactured, and other sources confirm its presence in Alaska and the Aleutian Islands. These were small planes, intended to carry only a pilot and up to 4 passengers. Such rough-and-ready small aircraft, capable of landing in rivers, on beaches, or other difficult areas, would have been essential to Nekoranec's work. Taking a close look at the plane in the Nekoranec photo makes it evident how important these amphibious aircraft were to the war effort. Look at the mud caked on those wheels. By reading these images closely, we can fill in contextual gaps for our veteran biographies. Photos can help us understand the places and times where veterans lived and served. We can also gain a better perspective about the tools, equipment, and clothing that veterans worked with every day. As you discover images that you think pair well with your biographies, consider how deeply you can connect it to their story. Dive into the mysteries, and don't hesitate to ask for guidance. There's so much to discover.